Hi, I'm Sarah, and these are my favorite books I read in 2021. So something I realized when I was putting this list together is that not everything on this list was a 5-star rating for me. I left off other books that I did give 5 stars to include books that I had given 4 stars to. I think maybe I need to be reconsidering my rating system a little sometimes. I've always said that my rating system is based purely on my enjoyment of the book. But I do often factor in sometimes how technically good I think the book was. So there were some books that I do technically think are 5 stars, but they just had less of an emotional long-term impact on me than some of the books I rated 4 stars because I could see obvious technical problems that I didn't like. But I'm not always consistent with this in my ratings. And I didn't even come up with 10 books. I have 9 books, but I'm actually fitting them into 7 spots because I'm putting certain books in one slot. It all makes sense. Starting off, my number 7 slot, the Simon Snow books. So I actually read the first one 2 years ago. And I've had these kind of sitting on my shelf for a while because I heard that this one was not that good. And so when this one came out this year, I ordered it right away, but I didn't read it right away. And then my cousin came to visit and she was borrowing them and she was reading them. I don't know, somehow that made them more appealing to me. So I read them. And this one, the year it came out, I saw it pop up in so many people's worst books or most disappointing books. I think my enjoyment of it had to do with the fact that I went in with my expectations bottom barrel. Because if you are expecting a repeat of Carry On, this is not that. This is the same characters, and it's like, okay, what if these people did exist and the things that happened in Carry On did happen to them? But at their heart, they're still just people. They're still just 20-year-olds that went through all this trauma and terrible things, and now they're just kind of floundering. Now they don't know what to do with themselves. And so they're gonna do stupid shit like go on a road trip to the United States and just be very British about it. It's funny because obviously the author of this book is actually American. There's a part in the book where all the main characters are meeting up with this villain and the villain offers them tea and all the British characters are just like, oh my God, I need the tea so bad. And the American guy that's with them is just like, what? And they're like, we'll worry about getting killed later after we've had our tea. Just like funny little things like that. But yeah, this book does not have the drama and the kind of cohesiveness and the same vibes as Carry On does. But if you go into this expecting that it's just going to be these characters on this kind of road trip without a ton of purpose to it, it's enjoyable. I enjoyed reading this. I liked the writing style. I liked what it did. So much so that when I immediately finished reading it, I read the next one. And I like this one even more. This one's obviously quite a bit bigger. I think she did a really good job of tying up all these characters and this world, the relationships, just everything really came together well. And I really enjoyed this. I gave both of these 5 stars. And if I'm being honest, and I might as well be because this is my channel and nobody watches it, when I think about things that I really enjoyed reading and look back on and just had a good time, these 2 are way up there. Next up is The Year of the Witching. This is one of the couple of books that I don't actually have a physical copy of this. I read this on my Kindle and I do plan to obtain for myself a physical copy. I'm just waiting for either a used thrifted copy to come into my path or for a really good deal on a new one, and that just hasn't happened yet. I was surprised by how much I liked this book. I was surprised that I thought this was YA when I went into it, and I'm still thinking back, not 100% sure if this is YA or not. I think it's almost more of new adult, kind of in that in-between range. But it's about this young woman in this Puritan society. She's a witch. She's getting haunted, and I was very impressed with how spooky it managed to be. I felt like the stakes were real, as they so often do not feel real in YA. I believe this is supposed to be a series, or there's supposed to be a sequel to this coming, and it's definitely one that I read and wanted to read the next one right away. Unfortunately for me, it doesn't exist. I liked it a lot. It had really good spooky vibes, and I would recommend it if you're looking for that spooky witchy read. Next up we have What Beauty There Is. This one's probably the most questionable of anything on this list because I look back at it and I'm like, that villain was so cheesy. There was so much insta-love, so many of these YA tropes that I technically do not like. But this is a book I've thought about a lot, and I read it back, I don't know, months and months ago. Something about this thing has stuck with me. It's about this boy that his father's in prison. His mother commits suicide very early in the book. He's trying to take care of his younger brother and they get kicked out of their house and they have nowhere to go. And it's an extremely cold, I think it's like North Dakota or something like that. And it's winter. And they're just like literally trying to find shelter and food. That's how like poverty stricken they are. And he doesn't want his brother to be taken away by foster care. And in the midst of all of this, he's trying to locate this potential treasure that his father went to prison for stealing or trying to obtain in some way. And the people that were either working with or working against his father, I can't remember the specifics, but there's this villain guy that thinks that he knows where this money is, and so he starts coming after him. And then he gets involved with this girl who's trying to help him and his brother. Of course, it turns out she's the daughter of that guy. So it's a very tortured love type situation. My biggest problem with this book was that it was 100% insta love, just like instant. Like they go from barely knowing each other to I would die for you instantly. Like I know there's a lot of criticism about insta love and YA that's kind of like teenagers do kind of insta love themselves. They really do. But this book, it was extreme. So that was kind of a problem because their relationship is one of the big parts of the book. And the other problem was the villain, the father. Like I know what the author was trying to do with this guy. She was trying to create this like wicked, smart villain, but everything about it was just so cheesy that it read like a fedora wearing that classic guy, what he thinks a scary, smart villain would be like, where they're coming up with this obvious shit and being like, well, a man of intelligence. So he was bad. But something about this book, I've been thinking about it for months, and I've been thinking about how much I want a physical copy because I'd like to redo a reread or like a flip through reread, which is easier when you have a physical book, obviously. I hope the sequel does go through on this one. I don't know if it got the popularity that was probably hoped for, but it was a winner for me, despite some of the YA cringe, if you will. And then another one. This one I did also read for free on NetGalley, like What Beauty There Is, but I did find a good deal on it and I just wanted to buy the physical copy, both for rereading purposes and also because this cover is just like, if I had to pick my top book cover of all time, it would be this. Nothing can compare to this. This was another one. I gave it 4 stars because at the time I read it, I was really annoyed by the fact that there were no quotations around speech. That drives me nuts. I know what she was trying to do. She was trying to give everything like this more dreamy feel, which the book has, but it just makes things confusing. I don't like gimmicks like that. And I really I hated the romantic interest. Nothing redeemable about him or the romance, in my opinion. But overall, the vibes of this book and just the time that is spent on like these minute details of being an astronaut, like the way it affects her body and her life, is just like, parts of this has stuck with me. And I love it, and I plan to reread it because I just love it so much. I feel like the reason this book didn't get much attention is because it was marketed really poorly. Like obviously you have this gorgeous fucking cover and it's about a female astronaut. There's so much stuff you could have focused on, but instead they were marketing this as almost like a space adventure rescue mission, and it's not. It is absolutely not that at all. So if you were looking for sci-fi, high space thrills, this is not that book. It was also marketed as being an LGBTQ plus book. If you were going into this book looking for that, you'll be sorely disappointed because the main character is straight and the main romance is between a man and a woman, like cisgender man, woman, no nuance, no LGBTs or Qs anywhere. There is the minorest of relationship between 2 other female astronauts. It's not really talked about. It's just there in a, gay people exist type of way. It's absolutely not enough to market this as an LGBTQ plus book. So obviously anyone that went into it reading it looking for that was going to be very disappointed. Like it definitely takes more than gay people existing in your world to really qualify you as that type of a book. I love this book, but you should not go into it expecting any type of action-y sci-fi. It is slow, it is dreamy, it is 100% like narrative over plot. And I love that about it, but I can understand why people were disappointed by this book if they went into it looking for something different, but I loved it. Next up, Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This was a surprising one. This was the shortest book I read all year. I think it's technically like a novella, and it's part of a series of novellas. It's one of the weirdest books I have ever read. It's about children that at some point in their lives previously were pulled into other dimensions. They have somehow gotten back into our dimension and are unhappy about it. They were happier in their other dimensions. And they're all in the school together, coping with that. It's the weirdest concept, the way some of these other dimensions were and are described. Like, the rules of the world are never like concretely explained, but something about this was just so readable and so thought-provoking despite being so short, so tiny. She doesn't waste time in like these overly logical explanations trying to explain how these other worlds work, how people get into them, how the right people end up in the right worlds or not. She just doesn't waste time on it. She just like talks about it all like it's all this kind of established lore that you already know. Somehow it works, even though it was so short. And I do think I would have liked this book, and I think I would have read it if it did have all that extra description and everything, but I liked this so much. There's several books in this series, and I bought 2 or 3 of them more that I haven't got to yet, but I really plan on, because I love this and I need other people to read this and tell me, is it just me? Do other people like this too? I know some other people do because I got this from a BookTube recommendation, but my friends, if you are looking for a short, weird book, please read this and let me know what you think. And then next, my number 2 spot, Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. I read both the books by this author this year, and I kind of put them both in the same spot, even though Once There Were Wolves was my favorite. There were a lot of similarities between the two. It really could have gone either way. I think what really pushed this one over the edge for me was my own personal kind of fan casting in my head that I had going on while reading this book. This is about a woman. She's a biologist. She's going to Scotland as part of a group that is reintroducing wolves into the wild of Scotland. Wilds? The nature areas. In my head, for the fan cast of this woman, Kristen Stewart. I know, it's controversial. If you've read this book, it probably would not be the first thing that pops into everyone's head. But this woman is she's kind of like awkward in the way she reacts with other people when she's reacting with all the Scottish people that are like, we do not want wolves in our hometown. That sounds pretty dangerous. And she has these interactions like I could just see Kristen Stewart so well. And then the love interest, the Scottish guy, the guy from Outlander, Sam something. First off, do not tell me that would not be an incredibly hot pairing to see. Like, you cannot convince me it would not be. Like, I'm sure there's other Scottish actors, but you know, this is the one, especially if you're looking for romantic lead. Trigger warning, there is a lot of animal death in this book, mainly the wolves, due to nature and other things. I am not a person that likes to read animal death at all, but in this book, it was essential to the plot, and it was treated with the proper weight. I really hate when the animal death is done just kind of cheaply, like to make things creepier in a mystery thriller or a horror book. I'm just not into it. This book is very much about animals in the wild in particular. It's kind of unavoidable, but I feel like it's treated with the proper weight. Whenever an animal dies here, it is not just brushed aside. It's not just for shits and giggles. These animals matter. It's important to the book and the plot and the story. So I'm okay with it. Migrations is also about a woman, she's not actually a biologist, but you know, kinda, who's tracking Arctic terns, the birds. This book imagines a future where global warming has had even a larger effect than it has now. So, you know, probably not that far away of a future. And basically all of the animals on the planet are dying. And this woman is trying to track the last migration of the Arctic terns. Both of these books are incredibly sad. I read them a little too close together. You need a break. That's probably why I like this one slightly less than this one, is because I read it second, and I can only do so much of this type of book. But the writing is absolutely beautiful. The stories are devastating, both of them. I highly recommend both of these though. I think this is a new favorite author for me. We'll see what she does next, but I absolutely loved both of these. And then my number 1 book of the year was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I have a physical copy of this, but I'm pretty sure my friend Allison still has it. I know I loaned it to her. I think that's where it is. I love this book. Everyone I know that has read it has loved it. I'm pretty sure President Obama put it in his top picks of the year, so something important he and I have in common. Pretty sure that's the only place where we overlapped, but you know. I read The Martian a few years back after watching the movie. Loved the movie, loved the book. I have his second book, Artemis, but I haven't read it yet because I heard it wasn't that good. But Project Hail Mary came out and I'd heard some good early reviews and wanted to read it, and it is insanely good. If you like The Martian, if you like his style of writing where he spends a lot of time on detailing like the scientific process and all these little things he's doing, and he makes it so that if you're not a science person, you can get the gist of it. You can get enough. Like, yeah, you're not going to understand every single little bit, but you know what's going on. You're never completely lost. Project Hail Mary is just like The Martian in that regard. And when I started reading it, I was like, oh, I kind of see what he's doing. He's kind of just recreating the vibes of The Martian. Because on The Martian, the main character was trapped on Mars all by himself. In this book, it starts off with a man alone on a spaceship that's on a mission to save Earth. But it takes the best turn that I never saw coming. It's the best possible thing that could have happened in the book, and it is just so delightful. I don't want to give spoilers away to anyone who has not had read this book because it is 100% worth it to read and to not know exactly what's going to happen going into it. But Andy Weir was the exact best person to write this book, and I believe they're making a movie with, I want to say, Ryan Gosling, and I hope they do it justice. The Martian was a great movie, so I have faith it can be done. I feel like this one will be a little more complicated, but you know, I hope it's maybe the same people doing it because they did such a good job with The Martian. But this book, just beginning to end, I was engrossed by it, and I read it, and I told my sister she had to read it, and that she was reading it, and I think she read it all in like 2 days, and it is a thick book, a thick, dense book, let me tell you. But she was giving me these updates, and I'm like, you're already that far? Didn't you just start? She's like, I can't stop. It was so good. Absolutely loved it. #1 book of the year. Definitely one that I would recommend to anyone that is not afraid of a little dense write. It is not going to be exactly for everyone. Like, you have to have some interest in science. Like, even if you don't know a lot or you're not like a big science person, you have to have at least a little interest in science to like these books. If that sounds like you, 100% pick up this book, read this book, and then tell me I am wrong, because I'm not wrong. It's fantastic. And that's it. Those are my favorites of this year. Let me know what you think. I know a little more controversial than other years. I felt like I didn't read that many big crowd pleasers that just like engrossed me, you know? But I had some good reads and I want to know what other people think about them. Thanks, and I'll see you next time for my next video, my most disappointing reads of 2021.